The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the wooden platform, and Delilah Durant pressed her gloved hand harder against the left side of her face, knowing that in moments everyone would see what she had spent the last 3 weeks of travel trying to hide. It was August 1876, and Oro Blanco, Arizona territory, looked exactly like she had imagined it would: dusty, sun-bleached, and unforgiving. The mining town sprawled across the desert landscape with wooden buildings that seemed to lean into each other for support. Through the stagecoach window, she could see curious faces turning toward the new arrival, and her stomach twisted with familiar dread. The driver opened the door, and hot desert air rushed in. Delilah gathered her worn carpetbag and stepped down carefully, her dark blue traveling dress already dampening with perspiration. She kept her left side turned away from the crowd, her hand still partially covering her face in a gesture that had become second nature over the past year. "Miss Durant," a male voice called out, and she turned slowly, prepared for the inevitable reaction. Zachary Zimmerman stood a few feet away, hat in hand, dust coating his boots and the lower part of his denim trousers. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard work, and sandy brown hair that needed cutting. His face was weathered by sun and wind, making it difficult to guess his age, though she placed him somewhere in his late 20s. His gray eyes met hers directly, then moved across her face, taking in the thick, raised scars that covered the entire left side from her temple down to her jaw, pulling at the corner of her mouth and eye. The scarring was vivid red and white, the kind that made people look away quickly or stare too long. Delilah lifted her chin, waiting for him to make an excuse, to say there had been a mistake, to get back on his horse and ride away. She had warned him in her letters, had told him about the fire that had destroyed her uncle's house in St. Louis and taken everything from her, except her life and these marks. But reading about scars and seeing them were two different things entirely. Zachary stepped closer, his boots crunching on the dry earth. He looked directly into her eyes again, and his weathered face softened into something gentle. "You must be exhausted from your journey. Welcome to Oro Blanco, Miss Durant. I am pleased to finally meet you in person." She blinked, thrown off balance by his calm acceptance. "Mr. Zimmerman, I understand if you have changed your mind. I can take work here in town or perhaps travel onward. I have a little money saved. Why would I change my mind?" He asked the question as if genuinely confused. "We have been corresponding for 4 months. I know your thoughts on literature and farming, your sense of humor and your kindness. I know that you read poetry and that you are skilled with numbers. The woman I have been writing to is standing before me now. But my face," she started, her voice catching, "is the face of someone who survived something terrible." He held out his arm to her. "And if you will permit me to say so, Miss Durant, you are beautiful to me." The words struck her like a physical blow. Beautiful. No one had called her beautiful since before the fire. She had been prepared for pity, for revulsion, even for clinical politeness. But this man, this stranger who had agreed to marry her based on letters and a photograph taken before the fire, a photograph she had sent with a detailed confession about what had happened to her, was looking at her as if she were precious. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough over the past year. Instead, she carefully placed her hand on his offered arm, feeling the solid strength of him through the worn fabric of his shirt. "Thank you," she whispered, not trusting herself to say more. He picked up her carpetbag with his free hand as if it weighed nothing. "The ranch is about 5 miles out of town. I have a wagon waiting. I thought you might like to stop at the hotel restaurant for a meal before we head out, unless you would prefer to go straight home." Home. The word was almost foreign to her now. Since the fire, She had been staying with a distant cousin who had made it clear that Delilah's presence was an unwelcome burden. She had no home, no family who wanted her, and no prospects. That was what had driven her to answer Zachary's advertisement for a mail-order bride in the first place. A meal would be welcome, she said, surprised to find that she meant it. She had been too nervous to eat breakfast, and the stagecoach journey had been long and uncomfortable. As they walked toward the hotel, Delilah was acutely aware of the stairs. An older woman pulling a small child actually gasped and hurried away. Two men standing outside the saloon stopped their conversation to gawk. She had learned to ignore such reactions, but each one still cut deep. Zachary noticed too. He slowed his pace and said loudly enough for the nearby onlookers to hear, "I am the luckiest man in Arizona territory. After months of correspondence, my bride has finally arrived, and she is even lovelier than I dared hope." Delilah felt heat rise in her unscarred cheek. The scarred side could no longer flush properly, something else the fire had taken from her. She glanced up at Zachary and saw that he meant every word. There was no mockery in his expression, no false bravado. He simply believed what he was saying. Inside the small hotel restaurant, they settled at a corner table. The proprietor, a thin man with a pronounced limp, brought them coffee and took their order for steak and potatoes. When he left, an awkward silence fell between them. Zachary cleared his throat. "I hope you do not find the ranch too isolated. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away, the Peterson family. Mary Peterson will likely visit once she hears you have arrived. She has been eager to have another woman nearby. I grew up in St. Louis," Delilah said, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee cup. "But my mother was from a small farming community in Illinois. I am not afraid of hard work or isolation. I remember you mentioning that in your letters. Your mother taught you to preserve food and tend a garden." He smiled, and she noticed that his smile was crooked, lifting higher on the right side. It made him look younger and somehow more approachable. "I confess I am terrible at growing vegetables. The cattle I can manage, but every garden I have attempted has withered and died." Despite her nerves, Delilah found herself smiling back. "Then it is fortunate you have acquired a bride with gardening skills." They talked about the ranch as they ate. Zachary explained that he ran cattle on a modest spread, about 200 head at present. He had built the house himself 3 years ago when he first claimed the land. It was simple but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and a covered porch that faced east to catch the morning sun. "I should be honest with you," Zachary said, pushing his empty plate aside. "The ranch does not make me wealthy. Some years are better than others. I can provide a decent life, but it will not be luxurious. You will have to work hard alongside me." "Mr. Zimmerman, I did not come here expecting luxury. I came hoping for a chance at a new life, and for a husband who would not be repulsed by my appearance. You have already exceeded my expectations on the latter, and I have never been afraid of hard work." He reached across the table, then hesitated with his hand extended halfway. "May I?" She understood what he was asking, and after a moment placed her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm. "I want you to know something," he said, his gray eyes serious. "I lost someone once. My younger sister, Catherine. She was thrown from a horse when she was 16, and she never woke up. She died 3 days later." He paused, his thumb moving absently over Delilah's knuckles. "After that, I understood something important. What matters is not what someone looks like, but that they are here, alive and whole in all the ways that count. You survived a fire that could have killed you. Those scars are proof of your strength, not a flaw to be hidden." Delilah felt the tears she had been holding back begin to slip down her cheeks the right side, where sensation remained normal. The scarred left side could still tear up, but she had little feeling there. "You are a remarkable man, Zachary Zimmerman. Just Zachary, please. And I am simply a rancher who recognizes a gift when he sees one." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "We should discuss the practical matters. I know we are strangers in many ways despite our letters. I will not rush you into anything you are not ready for. The house has 2 bedrooms. You will have your privacy until you decide otherwise." The relief that washed over her must have shown on her face because he nodded understandingly. "We will take things at whatever pace you need, Delilah. I may call you Delilah. Yes, of course, and I am grateful for your patience." They finished their coffee and left the restaurant. The wagon was exactly what she expected, functional and worn, pulled by 2 sturdy horses. Zachary helped her up onto the seat, his hands steady at her waist, and then climbed up beside her. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they left the town behind, following a dusty trail through the scrubland. The landscape was unlike anything Delilah had known in St. Louis. Here, everything seemed vast and exposed. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the brilliant blue sky. Rocky outcroppings broke through the sandy soil, and in the distance, mountains rose up in shades of purple and brown. It was harsh and beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten. "That is my land starting there," Zachary said, pointing to a wooden fence post, "and extending back toward those hills. There is a creek that runs through the property, not much more than a trickle this time of year, but it never fully dries up. That is why I was able to claim this particular piece." "It is bigger than I imagined," Delilah said, shading her eyes to look around. "Big enough to make a living, not so big I cannot manage it with seasonal help during roundups." He glanced at her. "Do you ride?" "I did when I was younger, but I have not been on a horse in years." "I will teach you again if you like. It is easier to cover ground out here on horseback." He paused. "Though there is no pressure, I know some people are uncomfortable around horses." They continued on, and Zachary pointed out various landmarks, a distinctive rock formation that marked the northern boundary, the stand of cottonwood trees that grew along the creek, the pasture where he kept his small remuda of horses. He spoke easily, not seeming bothered by the long silences that occasionally fell between them. Finally, the house came into view. It sat on a slight rise, a simple wooden structure with a steep pitched roof and that promised covered porch. It was painted white, though the paint was weathered and there were curtains visible in the windows. Beside it stood a barn, a corral, and several smaller outbuildings. "It is not much," Zachary said, and for the first time she heard uncertainty in his voice. "It is wonderful," Delilah said honestly. Compared to the cramped room she had been living in at her cousin's house, this looked like a palace. "You built all of this yourself?" "Had some help with the barn, but yes, mostly myself." He pulled the wagon to a stop near the porch. "Wait there." He jumped down and came around to her side, offering his hands to help her down. Delilah placed her hands on his shoulders and let him lift her from the wagon seat. For a moment, they stood close together, and she could smell the clean scent of soap and sun-warmed cotton. Then he stepped back, giving her space. "Let me show you around," he said, grabbing her carpet bag from the wagon bed. The inside of the house was simple but clean. The main room had a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, a cooking area with a cast iron stove, and 2 comfortable-looking chairs positioned near the hearth. The wooden floor was swept clean, and everything was organized with military precision. "This is your room," Zachary said, opening a door off the main room. The bedroom was small but charming. A brass bed frame held a mattress covered with a colorful quilt. There was a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the eastern hills. Wildflowers in a glass jar sat on the dresser, clearly picked recently. "I will let you get settled," Zachary said, setting her bag on the bed. "I need to tend to the horses and check on the cattle. Take your time. There is water in the pitcher for washing and more in the kitchen if you need it. Make yourself at home. This is your house now, too." After he left, Delilah stood in the center of the small room, trying to absorb the reality of her situation. She was in Arizona territory, in a house built by a man she had just met, preparing to begin a marriage to a stranger. By all rights, she should be terrified. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced in a long time: hope. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her brush, comb, and the small volume of poetry her mother had given her on the dresser. Then she poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed the dust of travel from her face and hands. The water was cool and felt heavenly against her overheated skin. Looking into the mirror was still difficult. The left side of her face was a landscape of twisted skin, the scars pulling at her features and making her appear permanently distorted. Her left eye, while functional, sat in a field of scarred tissue. Only the right side of her face remained as it had been: smooth skin, a properly shaped eye, a normal corner of her mouth. The doctors had said she was lucky to have survived, lucky to have her eyesight, lucky to be alive. Some days, luck felt like a cruel joke. But today, remembering the way Zachary had looked at her, the way he had said she was beautiful to him, luck felt real again. She changed from her traveling dress into something more practical: a simple cotton dress in a faded green that had been mended more than once. Then she ventured out into the main room, intending to explore further. The house was well stocked. The kitchen area had basic supplies: flour, salt, coffee, beans, some canned goods. There was a smokehouse out back, Zachary had mentioned, with some preserved meat. She found a basket and decided to investigate the pitiful garden patch she had glimpsed behind the house. Outside, the heat was intense but dry, so different from the humid summers of St. Louis. She found the garden easily: a small fenced area where a few tomato plants struggled bravely against the harsh conditions. Someone, presumably Zachary, had tried to grow beans as well, but they had clearly given up. Delilah knelt in the dirt, examining the plants with a practiced eye. They needed more water and probably some shade during the hottest part of the day. The soil was too sandy and would benefit from enrichment. It was salvageable, but it would take work. She was so absorbed in her examination that she did not hear Zachary approach until he spoke. "I warned you I was terrible at this." She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. He had removed his hat and his hair was damp with sweat. "It is not as bad as it could be. These tomato plants are survivors. With some care they will produce. If you can make anything grow in that patch, I will be impressed." He held out his hand to help her up. "It is too hot for you to be working out here now. Come inside. We should talk about practical matters." Back in the relative cool of the house, Zachary poured them both glasses of water from a large ceramic jug. They sat at the table, and he pulled out a small leather pouch. "This is the household money," he said, pushing it toward her. "You will need to manage the supplies and decide what we need from town. I go in every 2 weeks generally, more often if necessary." Delilah opened the pouch and saw a modest collection of coins and a few bills. "You are trusting me with this. You are my wife, or will be once we see the preacher." "Of course I trust you." He leaned back in his chair. "Speaking of which, I thought we could go into town in a few days and make it official. The preacher, Reverend Thomas, is a good man. He will not make a fuss or a spectacle. It can be as quiet and simple as you want." "I would appreciate that," Delilah said. She had no desire for a big public ceremony. "Will we need witnesses?" Mary and John Peterson would be happy to stand up for us, I am sure. They are good people." He hesitated. "Delilah, there is something you should know about living out here. It can be lonely. The nearest town is 5 miles, and we may go weeks without seeing another person aside from each other. If you are someone who needs society and conversation, this life might be difficult." "I am not," she said quietly. "Society has not been kind to me since the fire. People stare or avoid looking at me altogether. The isolation you describe sounds like peace to me." Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or sympathy. "Then we should get along well. I am not much for town life myself." They spent the rest of the afternoon establishing routines. Zachary showed her where everything was kept, how to work the stove, where he stored the feed for the chickens she had not realized he kept. There were 6 hens and a rooster in a coop near the barn, providing fresh eggs. "I will handle the cattle and the horses," Zachary explained. "The chickens and the garden, if you can revive it, will be your domain. We will share the cooking and cleaning. I have been batching it alone for 3 years, so I can make basic meals, but I will not pretend to be a good cook." "That seems fair," Delilah agreed. She was relieved that he did not expect her to do everything simply because she was a woman. Her cousin's husband had believed that women existed solely to serve men, and she had feared Zachary might hold similar views. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Delilah prepared their supper, a simple meal of fried salt pork, beans, and fresh biscuits she had made with surprising success in the unfamiliar stove. They ate on the porch, where the air was cooler and a slight breeze had picked up. "These biscuits are excellent," Zachary said, reaching for a third one. "Much better than anything I have made." "My mother's recipe," Delilah said. "She always said the secret was not overworking the dough." "Then I have been overworking it for years." He smiled that crooked smile again. "Tell me something about your mother. What was she like?" Delilah found herself talking about her childhood, about her mother's garden back in Illinois, and the summers she had spent there before her parents moved to St. Louis for her father's work. She talked about learning to preserve food, about her mother's patient teaching and gentle corrections. "She died when I was 19, Delilah said quietly. "Influenza. My father followed her 6 months later. The doctor said his heart gave out, but I think he died of grief." "I am sorry," Zachary said, and the simple sincerity of it made her throat tighten. "What about the fire?" "Will it pain you to speak of it?" Delilah considered. She had told him the basic facts in her letters, but not the full story. "My uncle took me in after my parents died. He was my father's older brother, a banker in St. Louis. I kept house for him and his son. One night, I was reading late in my room by lamplight. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, flames were everywhere. The lamp had tipped over." She touched the scarred side of her face unconsciously. "I tried to fight through the flames to reach the door. That is when this happened. My uncle's son, my cousin Peter, pulled me out, but my uncle was upstairs and did not make it. Peter blamed me, said I had killed his father with my carelessness." "You did not kill anyone," Zachary said firmly. "Accidents happen. If your cousin could not see that, then he was a fool. He allowed me to stay, but he made his resentment clear. His wife made it clearer still. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like a gift, a chance to leave, to start fresh where no one knew me before." Zachary was quiet for a moment, looking out over his land as the last light faded. "I am glad you answered my advertisement," he finally said. "I will be honest, Delilah. I placed that advertisement because I was lonely. This is a hard life to live alone, but I never expected to find someone I could talk to so easily. Your letters made me laugh. They made me think. I looked forward to each one." "As did I," Delilah admitted. Your descriptions of this place made me long to see it, and you never wrote as if I should be grateful that you would consider someone like me. You wrote as if we were equals. We are equals, he said. Never doubt that. That night, in her small bedroom, Delilah lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Somewhere in the darkness, cattle lowed softly. The wind whispered through the eaves of the house. She thought about Zachary in the other bedroom, wondered if he was sleeping or if he too was lying awake, contemplating the strangeness of having someone else in his home. She thought about his words, about being beautiful to him, and for the first time in a year, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps her life was not over after all. Perhaps it was just beginning. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Delilah rose early, tended to the chickens, and prepared breakfast while Zachary handled the morning ranch work. They ate together, conversation coming more easily each day. Then they would go about their separate tasks, coming together again for the midday meal and supper. Delilah threw herself into reviving the garden. She rigged a shade cloth over the struggling plants to protect them from the worst of the afternoon sun. She enriched the soil with compost from the pile she found behind the barn. She watered carefully, making every precious drop count. Under her care, the tomato plants seemed to perk up almost immediately. Zachary watched her work with undisguised admiration. "You have a gift," he said one afternoon, finding her on her knees in the garden, carefully staking up a plant that had started to sprawl. "Just knowledge passed down," she said, but she felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. On the third day after her arrival, Mary Peterson rode over. She was a woman in her mid-30s with laugh lines around her eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Delilah's scarred face and then smiled warmly. "You must be Delilah. Zachary has talked of nothing but your arrival for weeks. I am so pleased to finally meet you." Delilah found herself warming to Mary immediately. The other woman treated her scars as unremarkable, focusing instead on getting to know her. They sat on the porch drinking lemonade Delilah had made from precious preserved lemons, and Mary filled her in on the local community. "There are not many of us out here," Mary said. "The Petersons, that is me, my husband John, and our 3 children. The Morrison family about 6 miles south, though they keep to themselves mostly. A few other ranchers scattered about. Oro Blanco is growing, but it is still small compared to some towns." "It seems like a good place," Delilah said. "It can be hard," Mary admitted. "The heat, the isolation, the constant work. But there is a freedom here too. People do not judge as harshly as they might back east. We all have our reasons for being here, and most of us have learned not to pry too deeply into each other's pasts." Before Mary left, she confirmed that she and John would be happy to witness Delilah and Zachary's wedding. "Saturday would work well for us. The children can come too if you do not mind. They have been excited to hear about Zachary's bride." After Mary rode away, Delilah felt lighter somehow. She had made a friend, or at least the beginning of one. It was more than she had hoped for. That evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Zachary said, "Mary likes you, I could tell. I like her too. She is kind. She is. When I first came here, the Petersons helped me learn the land. John taught me things about ranching in this country that I never would have figured out on my own." He paused. "Are you comfortable with Saturday for the wedding?" "Yes," Delilah said, "though I have nothing appropriate to wear. My dresses are all quite worn." "You could wear what you have on now, and you would still be the most beautiful bride in Arizona territory," Zachary said, and there was no teasing in his voice, only sincerity. Delilah looked down at her faded green dress with its careful patches and felt her throat tighten. "You say things like that so easily." "Because I mean them." He shifted in his chair to face her more directly. Delilah, I know we have known each other only a few days in person, but I need you to understand something. When I look at you, I do not see damaged goods or a woman marked by tragedy. I see someone who survived. I see strength and grace. I see a woman who knows how to make biscuits and coax life from difficult soil. I see someone I am proud to call my wife. Zachary. She did not know what to say, how to respond to such undeserved kindness. You do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He stood. I have some paperwork to do before bed. Sleep well, Delilah. She watched him go inside, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the lamplight from within. Her heart was doing strange things in her chest, fluttering in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. Saturday arrived with a cloudless sky and temperatures that promised to be brutal by afternoon. Delilah dressed in her best, a dress in dark blue cotton that had been her second best before the fire and was now the finest thing she owned. She arranged her hair carefully, attempting to style it in a way that would minimize the scarring on her left side, but ultimately giving up. There was no hiding what had happened to her. When she emerged from her bedroom, Zachary was waiting in his Sunday best dark trousers, a clean white shirt, and a black vest. His hair was still damp from washing and he had shaved. He looked younger without the perpetual dust and stubble, and Delilah realized he was actually quite handsome. "You look lovely," he said, offering his arm. They took the wagon into town, arriving at the small church just before noon. The Petersons were already waiting John, a stocky man with a friendly face, Mary, and their 3 children ranging from about 6 to 12 years old. The children stared at Delilah's scars with open curiosity, until Mary quietly corrected them. Reverend Thomas was an elderly man with a gentle manner. He performed the ceremony in the church's simple interior, speaking about commitment and partnership rather than obedience and duty. Delilah appreciated that. When Zachary slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his hands were steady and warm. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, looking into her eyes. She repeated the words, placing a band on his finger as well. They had bought the rings the day before during a quick trip into town, choosing simple styles that would not catch on things during work. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas said. Zachary leaned in slowly, giving Delilah time to move away if she wanted. She did not. His lips brushed against hers gently, a soft promise of more to come. When he pulled back, she saw warmth in his eyes that made her breath catch. They were married. The Petersons insisted on taking them to the hotel restaurant for a wedding meal. The children were excited, chattering about the ceremony and asking Delilah questions about where she was from and what St. Louis was like. She answered as best she could, touched by their innocent acceptance. After the meal, John pulled Zachary aside for some conversation about cattle prices, and Mary moved her chair closer to Delilah's. "He is a good man," Mary said quietly. "One of the best I have known. He will treat you right." "I believe he will," Delilah said. "I know it is not my place, but I wanted to say something." Mary glanced to where Zachary stood talking with her husband. John's brother was badly scarred in a mining accident, lost half his face to an explosion. I saw what that did to him, how people treated him afterward. It was not right or fair. I just want you to know that out here, among those of us who stay and work this land, we judge people by different measures. Your scars do not define you to us. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Mary. That means more than you know." The ride back to the ranch was quiet but comfortable. Delilah studied the gold band on her finger, marveling at how much her life had changed in less than a week. She was married. She had a home. She had a husband who looked at her with respect and something that might, given time, become affection or even more. As if reading her thoughts, Zachary said, "Nothing has to change tonight. I meant what I said about giving you time." "I know, and I am grateful." She paused, gathering her courage. "But Zachary, I want you to know that I am not afraid of you. My hesitation is not because I do not trust you. It is because—" She struggled to find the words. "I have never been with anyone, and after the fire I assumed I never would be. This is all very new to me." "We have all the time in the world," he said gently. "There is no rush." That night, Delilah lay in her bed thinking about the kiss at the altar, brief as it had been. She thought about Zachary's kindness, his steady presence, the way he spoke to her as an equal. She thought about Mary's words that scars did not define her here. In the darkness, she could hear Zachary moving around in his room. The walls were thin enough that she could track his movements, the creak of the bed frame as he sat, the soft sound of boots being removed. She wondered if he was thinking about her too, or if he was simply settling in for sleep after a long day. The weeks that followed their wedding were perhaps the happiest of Delilah's life. She and Zachary fell into an easy partnership, working side by side during the day and spending their evenings talking on the porch or playing cards at the kitchen table. He taught her to ride again, patiently working with her until she felt confident on the gentle mare he had selected for her use. She taught him about gardening, and together they expanded the garden patch, planting squash and beans that would mature in the cooler fall months. The physical distance between them remained, but it was shrinking. Zachary would touch her hand in passing, or place his hand on the small of her back as they walked together. These small intimacies felt significant to Delilah, who had grown accustomed to people avoiding physical contact with her. One evening, about a month after the wedding, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Zachary said, "There is a dance in town next Saturday. Would you like to go?" Delilah's immediate instinct was to refuse. The thought of being in a crowded space where people would stare at her scars made her stomach clench with anxiety. But she looked at Zachary's hopeful face and reconsidered. He never asked for much. He worked hard, treated her with unfailing kindness, and accepted her limitations without complaint. The least she could do was try. "All right," she said, and watched his face light up. "We do not have to stay long if you are uncomfortable," he said quickly. "But I thought it might be nice to go out to let people meet you properly." The week leading up to the dance, Delilah found herself increasingly nervous. Mary stopped by midweek and, sensing Delilah's anxiety, offered reassurance. "It will be fine," Mary said as they sat shelling beans from Delilah's revitalized garden. "Most of the people there are ranchers and their families. They are practical folk who have seen all manner of hardships. They will not judge you." "Some already have," Delilah said quietly. "In town, people stare." "Some people stare at anything different," Mary said pragmatically. "But those are not the people who matter. The ones who matter, your neighbors, the people you will rely on and who will rely on you. They care about character, not appearance." On Saturday evening, Delilah dressed in her dark blue dress again and attempted to arrange her hair in a more elaborate style. Zachary wore his Sunday best, and together they made the journey into Oro Blanco as the sun began its descent. The dance was being held in the largest building in town, a hall that served multiple purposes depending on the day. When they arrived, music was already playing, and people were gathering. Delilah took a deep breath and let Zachary lead her inside. The reaction was immediate and varied. Some people did stare. A few looked away quickly, uncomfortable. But many, particularly the ranching families Zachary introduced her to, greeted her warmly and without apparent judgment. John and Mary were there with their children, and Mary immediately drew Delilah into conversation with several other ranch wives. "This is Susan Morrison," Mary said, introducing a tired-looking woman with kind eyes. "Susan, this is Delilah Zimmerman, Zachary's new bride." Susan smiled. "I am so pleased to meet you. We live south of here, so we do not get to town often, but I have heard good things." As the evening progressed, Delilah relaxed slightly. Yes, there were some people who treated her with barely concealed revulsion, but there were more who seemed genuinely welcoming. When the music started in earnest, Zachary asked her to dance. "I am not sure I remember how," Delilah said nervously. "Neither am I," he admitted. "We can fumble through it together." They joined the other couples on the floor, and while neither of them was particularly graceful, they managed a respectable waltz. Being held in Zachary's arms, his hand firm on her waist, his other hand clasping hers, felt both strange and right. She was acutely aware of his closeness, the scent of him, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said as they moved to the music. "I know it was not easy for you." "Thank you for being patient with me," she replied. They danced 2 more times before taking a break for refreshments. As they stood near the refreshment table drinking lemonade, a well-dressed woman Delilah did not recognize approached. She looked Delilah up and down with barely concealed disdain. "So you are the mail-order bride everyone is talking about," the woman said, her tone making it clear this was not a compliment. "I must say, Zachary, you could have done better. Why settle for damaged goods?" Delilah felt the words like a physical blow, her face burning with humiliation. But before she could respond, Zachary stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Delilah and the woman. "Mrs. Carleton," he said, his voice cold and hard in a way Delilah had never heard before. "You will apologize to my wife immediately, or you will leave this gathering." "I was merely stating a fact," Mrs. Carleton said, though she looked taken aback by his vehemence. "You are being cruel and ignorant," Zachary said. "My wife is beautiful, intelligent, and kind, qualities you clearly lack. I consider myself the luckiest man in this territory to have her. Now apologize or leave." Mrs. Carleton looked around, realizing that their confrontation had attracted attention. Several people were watching, including John Peterson, who had moved to stand beside Zachary in a show of support. "I apologize if I caused offense, Mrs. Carleton said stiffly before turning and walking away. Zachary turned to Delilah, his expression immediately softening. "Are you all right?" Delilah nodded, not trusting her voice. She was shaken by Mrs. Carleton's cruelty, but also deeply moved by Zachary's defense of her. No one had ever stood up for her like that, had claimed her so publicly and proudly. "Would you like to leave?" Zachary asked quietly. "No," Delilah said, finding her voice. "I will not let people like her drive me away." Pride flickered across Zachary's face. "That is my wife," he said, and offered her his arm. They stayed for another hour, dancing and socializing, and Delilah held her head high. When they finally left, climbing into the wagon for the ride home, she felt exhausted but also triumphant. "I am sorry about Mrs. Carleton," Zachary said as they drove through the darkness, the wagon's lantern casting a small pool of light. "She is a bitter woman whose husband made his fortune in mining and now thinks she is better than everyone else." "You do not have to apologize for her," Delilah said. "But Zachary, what you said to her, the way you defended me." She trailed off, emotion making her voice thick. "I meant every word," he said firmly. "And I will say it as many times as necessary until you believe it. You are beautiful to me, Delilah, inside and out." When they arrived home, Zachary helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. In the moonlight, his face was all shadows and planes, but his eyes were visible, intense and focused on her. "Zachary," she whispered. "Delilah, I know I said I would give you time, and I will honor that. but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown far beyond what I expected. You are not just my wife in name. You are my partner, my friend, and the person I look forward to seeing every morning and talking with every evening. If you do not feel the same, I will understand." She kissed him, cutting off his words. It was impulsive and awkward, but it silenced his doubts. He responded immediately, his arms coming around her and pulling her close. This kiss was nothing like the chaste brush of lips at their wedding. This was deeper, more urgent, full of a month's worth of growing attraction and affection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Delilah said, "I feel the same way. I have been feeling the same way for weeks now." "Then why?" he started. "Because I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that you were being kind out of obligation or pity. Afraid that in the dark, when you touched me, you would be repulsed by my scars." "Never," Zachary said fiercely. "Your scars are part of you, and I find every part of you beautiful. Let me show you." He took her hand and led her inside to his bedroom this time. In the lamplight, he kissed her again, slower now, savoring. His hands moved to her hair, carefully removing the pins until her dark hair fell around her shoulders. She reached for the buttons of his vest, her fingers trembling slightly with a combination of nerves and anticipation. They undressed each other slowly, and when Zachary saw the extent of the scarring which extended down her neck and across her left shoulder, his only reaction was to kiss the damaged skin gently. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her scarred shoulder, and she believed him. That night, they became husband and wife in every sense. Zachary was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and Delilah discovered that her scars did not repulse him at all. In the darkness, with his hands on her body and his words of love and desire in her ears, she finally understood what it meant to be cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Delilah felt a contentment she had thought lost forever. Zachary's fingers traced idle patterns on her arm, the scarred one, as if the damaged skin was no different from the unmarked side. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "I love you too. I have been in love with you for weeks, but was afraid to say it and make you uncomfortable. We are quite a pair," she said with a soft laugh. "Both of us afraid to speak our hearts." "Then let us make a promise," Zachary said, tilting her face up so he could look into her eyes. "From now on, we speak honestly with each other. No more holding back out of fear." "I promise," Delilah said, and sealed it with a kiss. The months that followed were a time of deep happiness for Delilah. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts. The garden produced abundantly, providing vegetables that Delilah preserved for the winter months. The cattle herd grew. They acquired more chickens and even a few pigs, but more than the physical prosperity, it was the emotional richness of her life that made Delilah feel blessed. She and Zachary were true partners in every way. They worked together during the day and fell into each other's arms each night. They talked about everything: their pasts, their hopes, their dreams for the future. Mary Peterson became a close friend, stopping by regularly for visits and inviting Delilah and Zachary to supper at the Peterson Ranch. Through Mary, Delilah was introduced to other women in the area, and slowly, she built a community of friends who saw past her scars to the person beneath. Winter came to Arizona, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain that turned the desert briefly green. Delilah discovered that she was with child in early December, and the joy on Zachary's face when she told him made her heart swell. "A baby," he kept repeating as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you pleased?" Delilah asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Pleased does not begin to cover it," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I am overwhelmed with happiness." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Delilah continued to work the garden and tend the chickens, though Zachary became increasingly protective, insisting she not overdo things. Mary stopped by more frequently, offering advice and sharing her own experiences with pregnancy and childbirth. In early spring, Delilah gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Zachary Daniel Zimmerman, though they immediately began calling him Daniel to avoid confusion. The birth was attended by Mary and a midwife from town, and while it was painful and exhausting, Delilah had never felt such pure joy as when they placed her son in her arms. Zachary was completely besotted with his son. He would hold the baby for hours, marveling at tiny fingers and toes, murmuring promises about teaching him to ride and rope cattle. Watching her strong, capable husband turn to mush over their infant son made Delilah love him even more. As Daniel grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Zachary hired seasonal help during roundups, and they were able to increase their herd significantly. The house was expanded to include another bedroom, anticipating more children. Delilah had worried during her pregnancy about how she would feel nursing and caring for a baby, whether her scars would upset the child. But Daniel did not care about her appearance. To him, she was simply Mama, the source of comfort and food and love. His innocent acceptance was healing in ways she had not expected. 2 years after Daniel's birth, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Dorothy May. She had Zachary's gray eyes and Delilah's dark hair, and she was as different from her brother as night from day. Where Daniel was cautious and careful, Dorothy was bold and adventurous, keeping both parents constantly on their toes. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The children grew. The ranch expanded. Zachary and Delilah's love deepened, maturing from passionate newness into something solid and enduring. They faced challenges: droughts, difficult winters, a bout of illness that swept through the area, but they faced them together. One evening, when Daniel was 6 and Dorothy was 4, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset, as was their custom. Daniel was practicing his letters on a slate Delilah had bought for him, determined that her children would be educated. Dorothy was playing with a wooden horse Zachary had carved for her. Zachary sat beside Delilah, his arm around her shoulders, her scarred side pressed against him. "Are you happy?" he asked, a question he posed periodically as if he needed reassurance. Delilah looked at her children, healthy and thriving. She looked at the ranch, prosperous and well-maintained. She looked at her husband, whose face showed the lines of hard work and laughter, whose eyes still looked at her with love and desire. "I am more than happy," she said. "I am blessed beyond what I ever thought possible." "So am I," Zachary said, kissing her temple. "The day you stepped off that stagecoach was the day my life truly began." Daniel looked up from his slate. "Papa, tell us again about when Mama arrived and you said she was the most beautiful bride in Arizona." It was a story the children loved, requesting it repeatedly. Zachary had sanitized it for young ears, removing Mrs. Carlton's cruelty and focusing on the romantic elements. "Well," Zachary began, settling into the familiar tale, "I was waiting at the stage station, more nervous than I had ever been in my life. And then the coach door opened and your mother stepped out. She was wearing a dark blue dress and her hair was pinned up so prettily. And I said to her, 'You are beautiful to me,' because it was the truest thing I had ever spoken." "And you got married," Dorothy chimed in, having heard this story enough times to know it by heart. "And we got married," Zachary confirmed, squeezing Delilah's shoulder. "And we lived happily ever after." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Zachary and Delilah lay in their bedroom, the window open to let in the cool desert night air. Delilah's head rested on Zachary's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. Answering that advertisement, getting a wife with a scarred face instead of someone whole and unmarked. It was an old fear, one that surfaced occasionally despite all the years of love and reassurance. Zachary rolled to face her, his hand cupping her scarred cheek tenderly. "Delilah, how can you ask me that after all these years? You gave me everything I ever wanted: a true partner, beautiful children, a real home. Your scars have never been anything but a reminder of your strength to me." "I know. I am sorry. Sometimes the old doubts creep in." "Then let me banish them again," he said, and proceeded to show her, with kisses and caresses and murmured words of love, exactly how beautiful she was to him. 3 years later, Delilah gave birth to their third child, another son they named Christopher. The birth was more difficult than the previous two, and Mary, who attended along with the midwife, worried that Delilah should not have more children. But mother and baby ultimately came through healthy, and Christopher proved to be a happy, easy-going baby who completed their family. Daniel, now 9, took his role as oldest sibling seriously, helping with his younger brother and teaching Dorothy her letters as Delilah had taught him. Dorothy, at 7, was still the wildest of the children, always covered in dirt from exploring or climbing trees. Christopher simply smiled at everything, content to be passed from person to person as the family went about their daily work. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the area. Zachary had developed a reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle, and their brand was respected. They had hired a full-time hand, a young man named Samuel who lived in the small bunkhouse Zachary had built near the barn. Delilah had expanded her garden into a small truck farm, selling surplus vegetables in town and to other ranches. She had also become known for her preserves and pickles, which were in high demand. The household money pouch Zachary had given her on her first day had long since been replaced by a joint account at the bank in Oro Blanco, showing a comfortable balance that allowed them security and even some luxuries. But more than material success, what Delilah treasured most was the community she had found. Mary remained her closest friend, their children growing up together. The Peterson and Zimmerman families celebrated holidays together and helped each other during difficult times. Other ranching families had become friends as well, creating a network of support and fellowship. Even in town, where she had once faced stares and whispers, Delilah was now greeted warmly. She was known as Zachary Zimmerman's capable wife, as the woman who grew the best tomatoes in the territory, as the mother of 3 lively children. Her scars had become simply part of who she was, unremarkable to those who knew her. One afternoon in late summer, when Delilah was watching Christopher play in the dirt while she tended her garden, a fancy carriage pulled up to the ranch house. From it emerged Mrs. Carleton, the woman who had been so cruel to Delilah at that long-ago dance. Delilah straightened, brushing dirt from her hands, uncertain what to expect. Mrs. Carleton approached slowly, her expensive dress looking out of place in the dusty ranch yard. She looked older, harder around the edges than Delilah remembered. "Mrs. Zimmerman," she said, her voice stiff. "I wonder if I might speak with you." "Of course," Delilah said, gesturing to the porch. "Would you like some lemonade? It is quite hot today." Once they were seated with glasses of cool lemonade, Mrs. Carleton got straight to the point. "I have come to apologize. My words to you that night at the dance were unforgivable. I was cruel and petty, and you did nothing to deserve such treatment." Delilah was too surprised to respond immediately. Mrs. Carleton continued, "My husband left me. He ran off with a younger woman, taking most of our money with him. I have had much time to reflect on my behavior, on how I treated others when I thought myself above them. I am trying to make amends where I can." "I see," Delilah said quietly. "I appreciate your apology, Mrs. Carlton. You have built a good life here, Mrs. Carlton said, looking around at the well-maintained ranch, the thriving garden, the happy child playing nearby. "I heard people speak of you in town, of your kindness, your skill, how your husband looks at you as if the sun rises and sets on your face. You have what I thought I had, what I tried to hold on to with cruelty and pretension." "Mrs. Carlton," Delilah said gently, "I do not think happiness can be held onto through cruelty, but it is never too late to choose kindness instead." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "You are generous to even speak with me. We all deserve the chance to be better than our worst moments," Delilah said. "I have been shown great mercy and kindness in my life. How can I do less for others, Mrs. Carlton stayed for a little while longer, and their conversation moved to other topics. When she left, she seemed lighter somehow, as if unburdening herself of old cruelty had lifted a weight. That evening, when Delilah told Zachary about the visit, he shook his head in wonder. "You are a better person than I am. I do not know that I could have been so gracious to someone who had wounded you." "She cannot wound me anymore," Delilah said simply. "I know who I am now. I know I am loved and valued. Her opinion has no power over me. When did you become so wise?" Zachary asked, pulling her into his arms. "When I married a man who taught me to see myself through eyes of love instead of judgment," she replied. "The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Daniel grew into a serious young man who shared his father's love of ranching. Dorothy remained spirited and independent, declaring at age 13 that she wanted to train horses professionally. Christopher, the baby of the family, turned out to have a gift for numbers and business, keeping meticulous records of the ranch's operations from a young age. Delilah and Zachary grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experiences and weathered storms. One evening, when Daniel was 21 and preparing to start his own small ranch on land adjacent to theirs, when Dorothy was 19 and working with horses for several area ranches, when Christopher was 16 and helping manage the business side of their operation, Zachary and Delilah sat on their porch watching another sunset. "Do you remember that first day?" Zachary asked, his hand clasped in hers. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, how could I forget? I was terrified you would take one look at me and send me away. I took one look at you and knew I was the luckiest man alive." He lifted her scarred hand to his lips and kissed it. "That has never changed." Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder, content. In the distance, she could hear Daniel and Christopher arguing good-naturedly about something, while Dorothy's laughter rang out from the barn where she was working with a young horse. "We built a good life," she said softly. "We did," Zachary agreed. "You, me, and our children. The legacy we leave is not just this ranch, but the love that built it." Years later, when Delilah and Zachary were in their 60s, they became grandparents for the first time. Daniel married a kind young woman named Grace from a neighboring ranch, and they had a daughter with Delilah's dark hair and Zachary's gray eyes. Dorothy married later, at 25, to a horse trainer who appreciated her independent spirit, and they had twin boys who kept everyone running. Christopher, the scholar of the family, married a teacher from town, and they had 3 children in quick succession. The ranch house had been expanded several times by then, with additions to accommodate visiting children and grandchildren. Sunday dinners became major productions, with 3 generations gathered around the long table Zachary had built, sharing food and laughter and stories. Delilah's scars had faded over the years, becoming white and less pronounced, though they still marked the left side of her face. But she had long since stopped covering them or turning her face away. They were simply part of her, as much as her brown eyes or her capable hands. One afternoon, when their eldest granddaughter Emma was about 8 years old, the child climbed into Delilah's lap and traced the scars with gentle fingers. "Grandma, do these hurt?" Emma asked with a child's innocent curiosity. "Not anymore, sweetheart. They hurt a long time ago when I got them, but now they are just marks on my skin." "How did you get them?" Delilah told her about the fire, about the lamp and the flames, about being pulled from the burning house. Emma listened with wide eyes. "Were you scared?" Emma asked. "Very scared. But then I came here to Arizona and I met your grandfather, and he told me something very important." "What did he tell you?" "He said I was beautiful. And he meant it. He helped me understand that scars do not make you ugly and smooth skin does not make you beautiful. It is what is inside that matters, how you treat people, whether you are kind and brave and loving." Emma considered this seriously. "You are beautiful, Grandma. You are the most beautiful grandma ever." Delilah hugged the child close, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. And you are very wise for such a young person." Later, after Emma had run off to play with her cousins, Zachary sat beside Delilah on the porch swing they had installed years ago. "I heard what you told Emma," he said, "about being beautiful." "It is what you taught me," Delilah said. "All those years ago when I stepped off that stagecoach, convinced I was unlovable, you showed me the truth." "I simply told you what I saw," Zachary said. "What I still see when I look at you, the woman I love, who is beautiful in every way that matters." As they sat together, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for decades, Delilah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Arizona territory broken and scarred, expecting nothing but a chance to survive. Instead, she had found love, acceptance, purpose, and joy beyond her wildest dreams. The mail-order bride with burn scars covering half her face had become Delilah Zimmerman, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and pillar of the community. And every day, when Zachary looked at her with love in his eyes and told her she was beautiful, she believed him completely. Years continued to accumulate like rings on a tree, marking the passage of time. Delilah and Zachary entered their 70s still active and engaged with the ranch, though their children had taken over most of the daily operations. Daniel ran the cattle operation with his sons helping. Dorothy had established a successful horse training business that served the entire territory. Christopher managed the business side of all the family enterprises with his usual precise attention to detail. The family had become something of a dynasty in Oro Blanco and the surrounding area. The Zimmerman name was synonymous with quality, integrity, and community involvement. But at the heart of it all was the love story that had started it all, the lonely rancher and the scarred mail-order bride who had built something beautiful together. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family organized a large celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors from across the territory came to honor the couple. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food. A small band played music for dancing. Children ran everywhere, playing games and causing cheerful chaos. Delilah, now in her late 60s but still strong and straight-backed, wore a new dress in deep blue, the color Zachary always said brought out her eyes. Her scars had faded to white lines, barely noticeable except to those who looked closely. Her hair, mostly gray now, was swept up in an elegant style. Zachary, his own hair completely white and his face deeply lined by years of sun and wind, still had those gray eyes that looked at her with unwavering love. He wore his best suit, purchased especially for this occasion. As the party progressed, John Peterson, now also elderly but still spry, called for everyone's attention. He stood on the porch and waited for the crowd to quiet. 50 years ago, John began, a stagecoach pulled into Oro Blanco carrying a young woman from St. Louis. That same day, my neighbor Zachary Zimmerman got married. I had the honor of standing up as witness to their union. He paused, looking at Delilah and Zachary with obvious affection. In the 5 decades since, I have watched them build not just a successful ranch, but a true partnership. They have shown all of us what it means to love someone through good times and bad, through droughts and plenty, through everything life throws at you. Mary Peterson, leaning heavily on a cane but with her spirit undiminished, added, "And they raised 3 wonderful children who are themselves raising wonderful families. The legacy of love that Delilah and Zachary created extends far beyond themselves." Daniel stepped forward, his own children gathered around him. "My father once told me that the day my mother arrived was the day his life truly began. Growing up, we all saw what real love looked like by watching our parents. They taught us to value character over appearance, substance over style, and commitment over convenience. Everything good in my life stems from the example they set." Dorothy, standing with her arm around her husband, added with characteristic directness, "And they taught me that a woman can be anything she wants to be, that scars do not define you, and that the right partner will support your wildest dreams. Papa always said Mama was beautiful, and he meant it. He taught all of us to see the beauty in everyone." Christopher, ever the numbers person, said, 50 years of marriage, 3 children, 8 grandchildren so far, and 1 great-grandchild on the way. Countless friends, a thriving ranch, and a community that is better for their presence. By any measure, their marriage has been extraordinarily successful. Zachary stood then, offering his hand to Delilah. She rose and stood beside him, and he kept her hand clasped in his as he spoke. "I have never been good with speeches," Zachary said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet gathering. "But I want to say something today. 50 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride because I was lonely. I expected companionship, maybe someone to share the work. What I got was so much more. Delilah, you have been my partner, my best friend, the love of my life, and the reason I wake up grateful every morning. When you arrived with those scars, afraid I would reject you, I saw only your courage, your strength, and your beauty. That has never changed. You are beautiful to me today at this moment, just as you were beautiful when you stepped off that stagecoach 50 years ago." There was not a dry eye among the assembled guests. Delilah looked up at her husband, this man who had given her everything, and spoke from her heart. "Zachary, you saved my life, not by pulling me from a fire, but by showing me that life was still worth living. You taught me to see myself through your eyes as someone worthy of love, respect, and joy. Every day with you has been a gift. I would not change a single moment." They kissed then, to the applause and cheers of their family and friends. It was a long, sweet kiss that spoke of decades of love and commitment. The party continued late into the night. There was dancing, Zachary and Delilah sharing a waltz just as they had at that first dance so many years ago, though their steps were slower now. There were toasts and stories and laughter. The grandchildren ran wild in the darkness, playing games and building memories of their own. As the party finally wound down and guests began to depart, Delilah and Zachary found themselves alone on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. 50 years, Delilah mused. It seems impossible that so much time has passed. And yet not enough time, Zachary said, his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. I would take 50 more if I could. As would I, Delilah said softly. Though I suppose we should be grateful for the time we have had. Not everyone gets this. No, they do not, Zachary agreed. We have been blessed beyond measure. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence only possible between two people who have shared a lifetime together. In the house behind them, they could hear their children cleaning up, their grandchildren being settled down for the night. Tomorrow, most of the family would depart back to their own homes and lives. But for tonight, they were all together, 3 generations under one roof, all stemming from a mail-order bride and a lonely rancher who had taken a chance on love. Do you remember what you were thinking? Delilah asked. That first moment when you saw me. Before you said anything, Zachary was quiet for a moment, remembering. I was thinking that your eyes were beautiful, so expressive and alive. And I was thinking that you looked frightened and brave at the same time. And I was thinking that I had better not mess this up, because the woman standing in front of me was exactly what I needed, scars and all. I was thinking that you were going to turn away, Delilah admitted. I was already planning what I would do, where I would go. I am glad you were wrong, Zachary said, kissing the top of her head. So am I, Delilah replied. So very, very glad. The months following their anniversary celebration were quiet and peaceful. Delilah spent her days tending a smaller version of her once extensive garden, visiting with grandchildren, and working on a project she had kept secret from everyone. She was writing down the story of her life, from her arrival in Arizona to the present day, so that future generations would know the truth of their family's beginning. Zachary continued to ride the ranch daily, though he left the heavy work to younger men. He still rose early, still checked on the cattle and horses, still maintained his lifelong habits of care and responsibility. But he always made sure to be home for supper with Delilah, and their evenings on the porch remained sacrosanct. Late one evening in early autumn, after a particularly beautiful sunset, Delilah showed Zachary what she had been writing. She handed him the leather-bound journal with some trepidation. I wanted our grandchildren and their children to know the true story, she explained. Not just that we met and married, but what it really meant, how you changed my life. Zachary read in silence, his weathered fingers turning pages carefully. When he finished, there were tears on his cheeks. This is beautiful, Delilah, and important. You should make sure it is preserved, that the family knows about it. I will, she promised. I wanted you to read it first to make sure I got everything right. You got everything right, he assured her. Including the most important part, that we loved each other truly and completely, and that we built something that will last long after we are gone. Winter came gently that year, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. Delilah and Zachary celebrated Christmas with all their children and grandchildren present, the house bursting with noise and activity and love. It was a perfect day, full of laughter and food and the chaos of family. As the years moved into their mid-70s, both Delilah and Zachary began to slow down more noticeably. Zachary's joints ached in the mornings, making it harder to ride. Delilah found herself tiring more easily, needing afternoon rests. But they remained active and engaged, refusing to let age defeat them. One spring morning, when the desert was briefly green with new growth, Delilah woke to find Zachary already up and moving around. She dressed and went to find him, discovering him on the porch with 2 cups of coffee waiting. I wanted to watch the sunrise with you, he said as she sat beside him. It never gets old, does it? This view, this land, this life. Never, Delilah agreed, accepting the coffee gratefully. Every morning I wake up here with you still feels like a gift. They sat in companionable silence as the sky lightened, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink. Cattle lowed in the distance. Birds began their morning songs. The world was waking up around them, as it had every morning for over 50 years. "I love you," Zachary said suddenly. "I need you to know that. I love you as much today as I did when we first met. More even, because now I know every part of you and I cherish it all." Delilah looked at him, surprised by the sudden intensity in his voice. "I know you love me. You show me every day, and I love you just as much." "What brought this on?" "Just a feeling that I should say it out loud," Zachary said, taking her hand. "That I should make sure you know." More years passed, filled with the ordinary moments that make up a life: family dinners and quiet evenings, the birth of more great-grandchildren, the changing seasons on the ranch. Delilah and Zachary grew older, more fragile, but their love remained constant. When Zachary was 78, he took ill during a particularly harsh winter. A persistent cough turned into pneumonia, and despite the doctor's best efforts and Delilah's constant care, he grew weaker. The family gathered, knowing the end was near. On his last day, Zachary asked to be moved to the porch where he and Delilah had spent so many evenings. The family carried his bed out, arranging it so he could see the view he loved. Delilah sat beside him, holding his hand. "I am not afraid," Zachary told her, his voice weak but clear. "I have lived a good life, the best life, because of you, because of us," Delilah corrected, tears streaming down her face. "We did it together." "Promise me something," Zachary said. "Promise me you will remember that you are beautiful, always. Do not let anyone, including yourself, tell you differently." "I promise," Delilah whispered. "But only if you promise to wait for me. I will not be long behind." "I will wait forever if I have to," Zachary said. "But take your time, live. Enjoy our children and grandchildren. Tell them stories about us. Make sure they know." He died as the sun was setting, turning the sky into a masterpiece of color. His last words were, "Beautiful. You are so beautiful, Delilah." Delilah mourned deeply, but not bitterly. She had had over 50 years with the love of her life. She had been cherished and valued every single day. How many people could say that? She was surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her, living on land that she and Zachary had built together. His loss left a hole in her heart, but it did not diminish the gratitude she felt for the life they had shared. She lived for 3 more years after Zachary's death, remaining active and engaged despite her grief. She finished the journal she had been writing, adding the story of Zachary's last days and her reflections on their life together. She gave copies to each of her children, making them promise to pass the story down through the generations. On a warm summer evening, when Delilah was 81 years old, she gathered her children and grandchildren on the porch. The family had grown substantially. Daniel had 4 grandchildren of his own now, making Delilah a great-great-grandmother. She looked around at all the faces, seeing traces of herself and Zachary in various features and expressions. "I want to tell you all something," she said, her voice still strong despite her years. "When I came to this place, I thought my life was over. I thought the fire had taken everything from me, but I was wrong. Your grandfather, Zachary, showed me that my life was just beginning. He taught me that scars do not define us, that beauty is not about physical perfection, and that true love sees past surface appearances to the person beneath." She touched her face, where the old scars still marked her skin. "These scars used to be a source of shame for me. Now they are a reminder of everything good in my life. They brought me here, to Zachary, to all of you. Every child, every grandchild, every great-grandchild exists because I survived that fire, and because Zachary chose to see my beauty instead of my scars." Emma, her eldest granddaughter, now a woman with children of her own, spoke up. "You taught all of us that, Grandma. You and Grandpa taught us to value people for who they are, not what they look like." "That was your grandfather's gift to me," Delilah said. "And through me to all of you, never forget it. Beauty is kindness, beauty is strength, beauty is love. Those are the things that last." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Delilah passed away peacefully in her sleep. The family gathered one more time, and they buried her beside Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the desert they had both loved so much. On the shared headstone, the family inscribed their names and dates, and below that, a simple phrase that captured the essence of their love story: "You are beautiful to me." The ranch continued under Daniel's management, eventually passing to his children and then to their children. The house was preserved as much as possible, with the porch swing maintained and the view kept clear. Family gatherings still happened regularly, bringing multiple generations together to celebrate their heritage. And in each generation, when children asked about the scars in the old photographs of their great-great-grandmother, they were told the story. They were told about a young woman who arrived scarred and afraid, and a man who saw her true beauty. They were told about a love that built a dynasty, not through wealth or power, but through kindness, respect, and unwavering commitment. They were told that beauty is not about perfection, but about being seen and loved for exactly who you are. The leather-bound journal Delilah had written was carefully preserved and copied, so each branch of the family had access to the story in her own words. At family reunions, passages were often read aloud, reminding everyone of where they came from and the values that built their family. The tale of the mail-order bride with burned scars and the cowboy who said she was beautiful became a family legend, passed down with care and reverence. It served as a touchstone, a reminder of what really mattered in life. When young people in the family faced their own challenges with appearance or acceptance, they were reminded of Delilah and Zachary's story and found strength in it. Years turned into decades, and eventually into a century. The original ranch house became a cherished family landmark, visited by descendants from across the country who wanted to see where it all began. The porch where Delilah and Zachary had spent countless evenings was preserved with care, the swing maintained and the view kept clear. And on that porch, on special occasions, family members would gather to tell the story once more of a woman who arrived broken and afraid, and a man who had the wisdom to see past her scars to the beauty within. Of a love that proved stronger than fear, deeper than physical appearance, and lasting enough to build a legacy that endured through generations. It was a love story for the ages, born in the harsh beauty of the Arizona Territory in 1876, built on respect and partnership, and sealed with the simplest and truest of declarations: "You are beautiful to me." And in the end, that was all that mattered.